Picture this: a homeless veteran, down on his luck, stumbles upon a stranded billionaire whose helicopter has broken down in the middle of nowhere. With his extensive mechanical knowledge from his military days, the veteran offers to help, not realizing that this chance encounter will uncover a shocking secret that will change his life forever. In the heart of New York City, nestled among towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, a man named Jake Hamilton wandered the alleys and sidewalks, his weathered face and tattered clothes telling a story of hardship and loss. Once a proud soldier who served his country with honor, Jake now found himself homeless, struggling to find a purpose in a world that seemed to have forgotten him. As he rummaged through a dumpster behind a local diner, searching for scraps of food, Jake's thoughts drifted to his past. He remembered the camaraderie of his fellow soldiers, the adrenaline rush of flying helicopters in combat zones, and the love he once shared with his high school sweetheart, Emily. However, the memories of his time in the military were tainted by the nightmares that haunted him, the friends he lost, the horrors he witnessed, and the guilt that consumed him. Jake's life had spiraled out of control after returning from his last deployment. The trauma of war had left him with deep emotional scars, and he struggled to readjust to civilian life. He turned to alcohol to numb the pain, which cost him his job, his relationships, and eventually his home. Emily, unable to cope with his erratic behavior and refusal to seek help, had left him, taking their young son Max with her. Years passed, and Jake found himself alone on the streets, his only possessions being a backpack filled with a few cherished mementos and the skills he had acquired in the military. He spent his days wandering the city, taking odd jobs when he could, and his nights huddled in doorways or under bridges, seeking shelter from the elements. One fateful morning, as the sun peeked through the towering buildings, Jake made his way to Central Park, hoping to find a quiet spot to rest his weary bones. As he walked along the winding paths, he heard a peculiar sound, the sputtering and whining of a helicopter engine in distress. Curiosity piqued. He followed the noise until he came upon a small clearing where a sleek, black helicopter sat, its rotors motionless and its engine emitting plumes of smoke. Beside the helicopter stood a man in a tailored suit, his face etched with frustration as he spoke animatedly on his cell phone. Jake recognized him instantly from the countless magazine covers and television interviews. Theodore Vanderbilt, the billionaire CEO of Vanderbilt Industries, known for his luxurious lifestyle and cutting-edge technology. As Jake approached, Theodore ended his call and turned to face him, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone a mix of annoyance and apprehension. Jake raised his hands in a non-threatening gesture. "I couldn't help but notice your helicopter seems to be having some trouble. I'm a veteran with experience in aircraft mechanics. Maybe I could take a look." Theodore hesitated for a moment, sizing up the disheveled man before him. Desperation outweighed his skepticism, and he nodded curtly. "Fine, but don't touch anything without my permission." Jake approached the helicopter, his trained eyes scanning the engine compartment. As he worked, Theodore watched him intently, his initial distrust slowly giving way to grudging respect as he witnessed the veteran's expertise. Minutes turned into hours as Jake meticulously diagnosed the problem and began the delicate process of repairing the engine. Theodore, meanwhile, paced nearby, occasionally barking orders into his phone as he attempted to manage his business empire remotely. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Jake emerged from beneath the helicopter, wiping his grease-stained hands on his tattered jeans. "She's all fixed up," he announced, a hint of pride in his voice. "Just needed a few adjustments and a bit of TLC." Theodore eyed him skeptically, then climbed into the cockpit and fired up the engine. To his amazement, the helicopter roared to life, its rotors spinning smoothly. He stepped out, a grudging smile on his face. I must admit, I'm impressed. You really know your stuff. Jake shrugged, a flicker of his old confidence resurfacing. Just doing what I was trained to do, sir. Theodore reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. Listen, I could use someone with your skills on my team. Why don't you come by my office tomorrow, and we'll see about getting you a job? Jake hesitated, the offer tempting, but the thought of re-entering society daunting. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Vanderbilt, but I'm not sure I'm cut out for the corporate world anymore. Theodore's eyes softened, a flicker of understanding crossing his face. I know what it's like to feel lost, to wonder if you'll ever find your place in the world. But sometimes, all it takes is one person to give you a chance. Jake took the card, turning it over in his hands. I'll think about it. Thank you. As Theodore climbed back into his helicopter and lifted off, Jake watched him go, a glimmer of hope stirring in his chest. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to keep pushing forward. The next morning, Jake found himself standing outside the towering Vanderbilt Industries headquarters, his heart pounding as he smoothed the wrinkles in his second-hand suit. With a deep breath, he pushed through the revolving doors and made his way to the reception desk. Jake Hamilton, here to see Mr. Vanderbilt, he said, his voice steady despite his nerves. The receptionist, a young woman with a polite smile, checked her computer screen. Ah, yes. Mr. Vanderbilt is expecting you. Take the elevator to the top floor, and his assistant will meet you there. As Jake rode the elevator, his mind raced with possibilities. Could this be his chance to turn his life around, to find the stability and purpose he had been searching for? The doors opened, revealing a sprawling executive suite with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. A woman in her mid-30s, her hair pulled back in a sleek bun, greeted him with a warm smile. Mr. Hamilton. I'm Emily, Mr. Vanderbilt's assistant. He's just finishing up a call, but he'll be with you shortly. Jake froze, his heart skipping a beat as he stared at the woman before him. The years had changed her, but there was no mistaking those gentle eyes, that soft smile. Emily, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Emily's eyes widened, recognition dawning on her face. Jake, is that really you? Before either of them could say another word, Theodore emerged from his office, a broad grin on his face. Jake, glad you could make it. I've got big plans for you. He paused, noticing the tension between his assistant and the veteran. Is everything all right? Emily turned to him, her voice trembling. Theodore, this is Jake Hamilton, my ex and Max's father. Theodore's jaw dropped, his eyes darting between the two of them. Your ex-husband, the one who disappeared years ago. Jake swallowed hard, the weight of his past crashing down on him. I'm sorry, Emily. I never meant to hurt you or Max. I just, I couldn't face myself, let alone the people I loved. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch his cheek. I never stopped loving you. Jake, I just couldn't watch you destroy yourself. Theodore cleared his throat, a hint of awkwardness in his voice. Well, this is certainly unexpected, but perhaps it's a sign, a chance for new beginnings. He turned to Jake, his expression serious. I meant what I said yesterday. I want you on my team. But more than that, I want to help you rebuild your life. We'll get you a place to stay, help you reconnect with your son, and provide the support you need to heal. Jake's vision blurred with tears, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. I don't know what to say. I don't deserve this. Emily took his hand, her touch warm and reassuring. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jake. Let us help you find your way back. And so, with a tentative smile and a heart full of hope, Jake Hamilton took the first step towards reclaiming his life. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, that he would have to confront the demons of his past and learn to forgive himself. But with the love of his family and the support of newfound friends, he finally felt ready to face the future. One day at a time, as the weeks turned into months, Jake thrived in his new role at Vanderbilt Industries, his mechanical expertise and leadership skills earning him the respect of his colleagues. He reconnected with his son, Max, slowly rebuilding the bond that had been lost over the years. And though his relationship with Emily would never be what it once was, they found a new understanding, a friendship forged in the fires of shared pain and newfound hope. Looking back on that fateful day in Central Park, Jake realized that sometimes the most incredible journeys begin with a simple act of kindness, a chance encounter that can change the course of a life. And as he stood on the rooftop of Vanderbilt Industries, gazing out at the city that had once been his prison, he knew that he had finally found his way home. As Jake Hamilton settled into his new life, he found himself constantly amazed by the twists and turns that had brought him to this point. From a homeless veteran struggling to survive on the streets to a valued member of Theodore Vanderbilt's team, his journey had been nothing short of miraculous. Yet, even as he embraced his newfound stability, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that his past still haunted him, threatening to unravel the delicate balance he had worked so hard to achieve. One evening, as he sat in his modest apartment, poring over schematics for a new project, a knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. Cautiously, he opened it to find Emily standing there, her face etched with concern. "Jake, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. Inviting her inside, Jake felt a knot forming in his stomach. He had been working hard to rebuild his relationship with his son, Max, but his interactions with Emily had remained strained, the weight of their shared history hanging heavy between them. "What's wrong?" he asked, bracing himself for the worst. Emily took a deep breath, her hands fidgeting nervously. "It's Max. He's been acting out lately, getting into trouble at school. I've tried talking to him, but he just shuts me out. I think he needs his father." Jake's heart sank, a wave of guilt washing over him. He had been so focused on his own recovery, on proving himself at work, that he had neglected the most important thing in his life, his son. "I'm sorry, Emily. I should have been there for him, for both of you." She shook her head, a sad smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "It's not your fault, Jake. We've all been through so much. But now, we have a chance to make things right. Max needs to know that you're here for him, that you're not going to disappear again." Jake nodded, a determined glint in his eye. "I won't let him down. Not this time." The next day, Jake arrived at Max's school, his heart pounding as he waited outside the principal's office. When Max emerged, his head hung low. Jake couldn't help but notice how much he had grown, how much he resembled the young man he himself had once been. "Hey buddy," Jake said softly, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "I heard you've been having a tough time lately." Max shrugged, his eyes fixed on the ground. "What do you care? You weren't around when I needed you before." The words stung, but Jake knew he deserved them. "You're right. I wasn't there for you when I should have been. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I know I have a lot to make up for, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to be the father you deserve." Slowly, Max lifted his gaze, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "You mean it? You're not going to leave again?" Jake pulled him into a tight hug, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill down his cheeks. "Never again, Max, I promise." As father and son walked out of the school together, Jake felt a sense of purpose he had never known before. He had been given a second chance, not just to rebuild his own life, but to be there for the people who mattered most. Over the next few weeks, Jake threw himself into his new role as a father, spending every spare moment with Max. They went to ball games, worked on science projects, and even started volunteering at a local homeless shelter together. Slowly but surely, the walls between them began to crumble, replaced by a bond that grew stronger with each passing day. At work, Jake's dedication and ingenuity continued to impress Theodore and his colleagues. His unique perspective, born from his experiences on the streets and in the military, allowed him to approach problems in ways that others hadn't considered. Before long, he found himself leading a team of his own, tasked with developing new technologies that would revolutionize the aerospace industry. But even as Jake's star rose at Vanderbilt Industries, he never forgot the struggles he had faced, or the people who still faced them every day. He became a fierce advocate for veterans' rights, using his platform to raise awareness about the challenges they faced and the resources they needed to succeed. One crisp autumn morning, as Jake walked into the office, he was greeted by a flurry of activity. Theodore emerged from his office, a broad grin on his face. "Jake, I've got some exciting news. We've been invited to the White House to present our latest project to the president himself." Jake's eyes widened, a mixture of excitement and trepidation washing over him. "The White House? Are you serious?" Theodore clapped him on the back, his smile never wavering. "Dead serious. And I want you there by my side. You've been instrumental in getting us to this point, and it's time for the world to see what you're capable of." As the day of the presentation approached, Jake threw himself into his work with a renewed sense of purpose. He pored over every detail, refining and perfecting, until he was sure they had something truly groundbreaking to share. When the moment finally arrived, Jake found himself standing in the Oval Office, his heart racing as he shook hands with the president himself. As Theodore began the presentation, Jake's mind drifted back to the day he had fixed that helicopter in Central Park. The day that had changed everything. He thought about the man he had been then, lost, broken, and alone, and the man he was now, father, a leader, and a force for change. He realized that his journey had never really been about fixing helicopters or developing new technologies. It had been about fixing himself, about learning to hope again, to believe in the power of second chances. As the presentation drew to a close, the president turned to Jake, a look of admiration in his eyes. "Mr. Hamilton, your story is truly inspiring. To have overcome so much, to have used your experiences to make a real difference in the world. It's nothing short of remarkable." Jake felt a lump form in his throat, his voice thick with emotion as he replied, "Thank you, Mr. President. But the real heroes are the people who never gave up on me, even when I had given up on myself. My son, Max, who showed me what unconditional love looks like. Emily, who believed in me even when I couldn't believe in myself. And Theodore, who took a chance on a homeless veteran and gave me the opportunity to rebuild my life." As he spoke, Jake's mind drifted to the countless other veterans out there, the ones who were still struggling, still searching for their own second chances. He knew that his work was far from over, that there were still so many battles left to fight. But for now, standing in the Oval Office, surrounded by the people who had become his family, Jake Hamilton allowed himself a moment of pure, unadulterated joy. He had come so far, overcome so much, and he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the same courage, determination, and heart that had brought him to this moment. And so, as he stepped out into the bright Washington sunshine, Jake Hamilton took a deep breath, ready to embrace the next chapter of his extraordinary journey. He had found his purpose, his place in the world, and he knew that no matter what the future held, he would never stop fighting for the things that mattered most: family, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of the human soul. As the excitement of the White House visit began to settle, Jake found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had led him to this point. He had gone from the depths of despair, living on the streets and battling his own demons, to the heights of success, rubbing shoulders with the most powerful people in the world. Yet, even as he basked in the glow of his newfound fame, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more work to be done. One evening, as he sat in his office, poring over reports and schematics. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to see Emily standing there, a hesitant smile on her face. "Hey, Jake. I hope I'm not interrupting." Jake shook his head, gesturing for her to come in. "Not at all. What's up?" Emily took a seat across from him, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. "I wanted to talk to you about something important." Jake's brow furrowed, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. "Is everything okay? Is Max all right?" "Max is fine," Emily assured him quickly. "Better than fine, actually. He's been doing so well in school, and he's even started talking about wanting to be an engineer like his dad." A warm smile spread across Jake's face, pride swelling in his chest. "That's incredible. I'm so proud of him." Emily nodded, her own smile mirroring his. "Me too. But that's not what I wanted to talk to you about." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to say. "Jake, I've been thinking a lot about us, about our history, and everything we've been through." Jake's heart skipped a beat, his mouth suddenly dry. "Emily, She held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "Please, let me finish. I know we can't go back to the way things were. Too much has happened. Too much has changed. But I can't deny that seeing you these past few months, watching you rebuild your life and become the man I always knew you could be, it stirred up feelings I thought I had buried long ago." Jake swallowed hard, his mind reeling. "What are you saying, Emily?" "I'm saying that I still care about you, Jake, deeply, and I know that we can never be together the way we once were, but I don't want to lose you from my life again. I want us to be a part of each other's lives, to be there for each other, and for Max, as friends, as co-parents, as whatever we can be." Jake was silent for a long moment, his heart racing as he processed her words. Finally, he reached across the desk, taking her hand in his. "Emily, I care about you too, more than you could ever know, and I would be honored to be a part of your life, in whatever way you'll have me." Tears glistened in Emily's eyes as she squeezed his hand, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "Look at us, two grown adults, blubbering like teenagers." Jake chuckled, the tension in the room easing slightly. "I guess some things never change." As they sat there, hands entwined, Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. He knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy, that there would be challenges and obstacles to overcome. But he also knew that he was no longer facing them alone. Over the next few weeks, Jake threw himself into his work with a renewed sense of purpose. He had always been driven by a desire to make a difference, to use his skills and experiences to help others. But now that drive had taken on a new urgency. He began reaching out to veterans organizations across the country, offering his expertise and resources to help them tackle the issues facing their communities. He worked tirelessly to develop new programs and initiatives, from job training and housing assistance to mental health support and addiction recovery services. At the same time, he continued to push the boundaries of what was possible at Vanderbilt Industries. His team was making breakthroughs on a daily basis, developing technologies that had the potential to revolutionize not just the aerospace industry, but the world as a whole. Yet, even as he achieved success after success, Jake never lost sight of what truly mattered. He made sure to carve out time for his family, for the people who had stood by him through his darkest hours. He and Max grew closer than ever, bonding over their shared love of science and engineering. They spent weekends tinkering in the garage, building robots and rockets, dreaming up inventions that would change the world. And his friendship with Emily blossomed, growing stronger and deeper with each passing day. They learned to lean on each other, to support one another through the ups and downs of life. They may not have been together in the traditional sense, but they were a family, bound by love and loyalty, and the unbreakable ties of shared history. As the months turned into years, Jake's influence continued to grow. He became a speaker, traveling the country to share his story and inspire others to overcome their own challenges. He was invited to sit on boards and committees, to advise politicians and policymakers on the issues he cared about most, and through it all, he never forgot where he had come from. He never forgot the lessons he had learned on the streets, the valor and sacrifice he had witnessed in the military. He carried those experiences with him, using them to fuel his passion and drive his work. One crisp autumn morning, as he walked into the office, Jake was greeted by a sight that stopped him in his tracks. There, in the lobby, stood a group of veterans, their faces weathered and their eyes haunted by the same demons that had once plagued him as he approached. One of the men stepped forward, his hand outstretched. "Mr. Hamilton, I hope you don't mind us dropping in like this, but we wanted to thank you, in person, for everything you've done for us." Jake shook his hand, his throat tight with emotion. "Please, call me Jake, and it's me who should be thanking. You've served our country with honor and bravery, and you deserve so much more than the hand you've been dealt." The man smiled, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "That may be true. But you've given us something that we thought we'd lost forever: hope. You've shown us that there's life after the military, that we can still make a difference in the world, no matter how broken we may feel." As Jake looked around at the faces of these men and women, these warriors who had sacrificed so much, he felt a swell of pride and humility wash over him. He knew that he had been given a great gift, a second chance at life, and he knew that he had a responsibility to use that gift to help others, and so, with a renewed sense of purpose and a heart full of gratitude, Jake Hamilton set out to do just that. He worked tirelessly, day after day, to build a world where no veteran would ever have to face the struggles he had faced, where no family would ever have to be torn apart by the wounds of war. He built bridges between communities, forging partnerships and alliances that would last a lifetime. He mentored young people, showing them that there was no limit to what they could achieve if they set their minds to it. And he never ever gave up on the belief that every person, no matter their background or circumstances, deserved a chance to live a life of dignity and purpose. Years later, as he stood on stage, accepting yet another award for his work, Jake looked out at the sea of faces before him, the veterans, the families, the friends and colleagues who had been by his side through it all. And he knew, with a certainty that came from the very depths of his soul, that this was what he had been born to do. He had been given a second chance, a new lease on life, and he had used it to make the world a better place. He had taken the pain and suffering of his past and transformed it into something beautiful, something that would endure long after he was gone. And as he stepped down from the stage, into the waiting arms of his son and the woman who had never given up on him, Jake Hamilton knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had found his purpose, his calling, and he would spend the rest of his days living it out, one day at a time, for he knew that the true measure of a life was not in the accolades or the achievements, but in the lives that had been touched, the hearts that had been healed, and the love that had been shared. And in that moment, surrounded by the people who meant everything to him, Jake Hamilton knew that he was the richest man in the world. As the years passed, Jake Hamilton's legacy continued to grow, his impact reaching far beyond the borders of his own life. He had become a symbol of hope and resilience, a shining example of what was possible when one person had the courage to stand up and make a difference. But even as he basked in the glow of his success, Jake never lost sight of the fact that his journey had been far from easy. He had faced countless obstacles and setbacks, battling his own demons and the prejudices of a society that often seemed all too eager to write him off. One summer evening, as he sat on the porch of his home, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Jake found himself lost in thought. He thought back to the early days of his struggle, when he had been living on the streets, battling addiction and the lingering trauma of his time in the military. He remembered the looks of pity and disdain he had received from passers-by, the way they had hurried past him as if he were invisible, or worse, a threat. He remembered the gnawing hunger in his belly, the cold that had seeped into his bones on those long, lonely nights. But most of all, he remembered the moment when everything had changed. The moment when a chance encounter with a billionaire and a broken-down helicopter had set him on a path he never could have imagined. Jake smiled to himself, shaking his head in wonder. If someone had told him back then that he would one day be sitting here, a respected leader and a beloved father, he would have laughed in their face. But life, he had learned, had a way of surprising you. As he sat there, lost in his memories, Jake heard the sound of footsteps approaching. He looked up to see Max, now a tall, handsome young man, making his way up the path. "Hey, Dad," Max said, dropping down onto the porch beside him. "I thought I might find you out here." Jake smiled, draping an arm around his son's shoulders. "Just doing a little thinking, reflecting on how far we've come." Max nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, I've been doing some thinking too. About the future, and what I want to do with my life." Jake's heart swelled with pride, knowing that his son had grown into a kind, compassionate young man with a bright future ahead of him. "Oh yeah? And what have you come up with?" Max took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say. "I want to join the military. I want to serve my country, just like you did." For a moment, Jake was speechless. He had always known that Max looked up to him, that he saw him as a hero, but he had never imagined that his son would want to follow in his footsteps. "Max," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion, "are you sure about this? The military, it's not an easy life. It comes with a lot of sacrifices, a lot of challenges." Max met his gaze, his eyes burning with determination. "I know that, Dad. But I also know that it's a noble calling, a chance to make a real difference in the world. And who better to learn from than the man who taught me everything I know about courage and sacrifice?" Tears sprang to Jake's eyes as he pulled his son into a tight embrace. "I am so proud of you, Max. So incredibly proud. And I know that you will make an outstanding soldier, just as you have made an outstanding son." From that moment on, Jake threw himself into helping Max prepare for his military career. He trained with him, pushing him to his limits and beyond. Knowing that the skills he learned now could one day save his life, he also worked tirelessly to ensure that Max would have the support and resources he needed, both during his service and after. He lobbied for better mental health care for veterans, for more comprehensive reintegration programs, for a society that truly valued and honored the sacrifices of its warriors. And when the day finally came for Max to ship out, Jake was there. To see him off, his heart bursting with a mixture of pride and fear. He knew all too well the dangers that his son would face, the toll that combat could take on even the strongest of souls. But he also knew that Max was ready, that he had the strength, the courage, and the heart to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As he watched his son disappear into the distance, Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. He had done his job, both as a father and as a mentor. He had passed on the lessons he had learned, the values he held dear, and he knew that Max would carry them with him, no matter where his journey took him. In the years that followed, Jake continued to work tirelessly on behalf of veterans and their families. He founded his own organization, dedicated to providing support and resources to those who had served, and he became a leading voice in the fight for better treatment and care for those who had sacrificed so much. He also never lost touch with his own roots, making regular visits to the homeless shelter where he had once sought refuge. He met with the men and women there, listening to their stories and offering whatever help he could, knowing all too well the struggles they faced. And through it all, he remained a devoted father, a loyal friend, and a beacon of hope to all who knew him. He had come so far from those dark days on the streets, but he never forgot the lessons he had learned, the strength he had found within himself. One crisp autumn morning, as he made his way to the office, Jake received a phone call that would once again change the course of his life. It was Emily, her voice trembling with emotion as she delivered the news. "Jake," she said softly, "it's Max. He's been wounded in action. They're flying him to Germany for treatment, but they say it's serious." For a moment, Jake's world stopped. Turning, he felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath him, as if everything he had worked so hard to build was crumbling before his eyes. But then, with a strength born of years of hardship and resilience, he pulled himself together. He knew that his son needed him now more than ever, and he would not let him down. Within hours, Jake was on a plane to Germany, his heart racing as he prayed for his son's recovery. When he arrived at the hospital, he found Max lying in a bed, his body broken but his spirit unbroken. "Hey, Dad," Max whispered, his voice weak but filled with determination. "I guess I got a little banged up out there." Jake's eyes filled with tears as he took his son's hand, squeezing it gently. "You're going to be okay, Max. You're the strongest person I know, and you're going to get through this." And get through it, he did. With Jake by his side every step of the way, Max slowly but surely began to recover. He underwent surgery after surgery, enduring months of painful rehabilitation and therapy. But through it all, he never lost his sense of humor, his unbreakable spirit. He joked with the nurses, flirted with the doctors, and kept his fellow patients laughing even on their darkest days. And as Jake watched his son heal, both physically and emotionally, he knew that he had been right all those years ago. Max was a true hero, a warrior in every sense of the word. Months later, when Max was finally discharged from the hospital, Jake was there to take him home. As they drove through the streets of their hometown, Max turned to his father, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Dad," he said softly, "for everything, for being there for me, for never giving up on me. I couldn't have made it through this without you." Jake's heart swelled with love and pride, knowing that he had played a part in shaping this incredible young man. "You never have to thank me, Max. You're my son, and I will always be there for you, no matter what." As they pulled into the driveway of their home, Jake was surprised to see a crowd of people waiting for them. Friends, family, colleagues, all there to welcome Max home and celebrate his recovery. And as he watched his son being embraced by the people who loved him, Jake knew that he had finally found his true calling. Not in the military, not in the corporate world, but in the simple act of being there for the people who needed him most. For he had learned that the true measure of a man was not in the medals he wore or the accolades he received, but in the lives he touched and the love he shared. And in that moment, surrounded by the people he cherished most, Jake Hamilton knew that he was truly blessed. He had been given a second chance at life, and he had made the most of it every single day. As the years passed, Jake continued to be a force for good in the world, using his platform and his influence to make a difference in the lives of countless others. He spoke at conferences and events, sharing his story and inspiring others to overcome their own challenges. He worked with politicians and policymakers, advocating for the rights and needs of veterans and their families. He built schools and community centers, providing hope and opportunity to those who had been left behind. And through it all, he remained a devoted father, a loyal friend, and a shining example of what was possible when one person had the courage to stand up and make a difference. Looking back on his life, Jake knew that he had been through more than his fair share of struggles and hardships, but he also knew that every step of his journey had led him to this moment, to this place of purpose and fulfillment. And as he sat on his porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Jake Hamilton knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. He had found his calling, his reason for being, and he would spend the rest of his days living it out, one day at a time. For he knew that the true measure of a life was not in the years that were given, but in the love that was shared, the lives that were touched, and the difference that was made. And in that knowledge, Jake Hamilton had found a peace and a happiness that would last a lifetime. As the sun rose over the city, casting a golden glow across the towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, Jake Hamilton made his way to the office, his steps filled with purpose and determination. He had come a long way from the broken, lost man he had once been. But he knew that his journey was far from over. In the years since Max's injury and recovery, Jake had thrown himself into his work with a renewed sense of urgency. He had seen firsthand the toll that war could take on even the strongest of souls, and he was determined to do everything in his power to support and uplift those who had served. As he walked through the doors of Vanderbilt Industries, he was greeted by a flurry of activity. Engineers and designers hustled past, their arms filled with blueprints and prototypes, while executives and managers huddled in corners, discussing the latest projects and initiatives. But Jake barely noticed the chaos around him. His mind was focused on the task at hand, on the mission that had become his life's work. He made his way to his office, settling behind his desk and pulling out a stack of files. There were reports to review, meetings to attend, decisions to be made. But Jake approached each task with the same level of dedication and attention to detail, knowing that every choice he made could have a profound impact on the lives of others. As he worked, his mind drifted to the countless veterans he had met over the years, the men and women who had sacrificed so much for their country. He thought of the struggles they faced, the obstacles they had to overcome, and the strength and resilience they displayed in the face of unimaginable adversity. And he knew that he had to do more. With a newfound sense of purpose, Jake began to formulate a plan. He reached out to his contacts in the military and veteran communities, gathering information and insights into the challenges they faced. He met with politicians and policymakers, lobbying for more resources and support for those who had served, and he began to lay the groundwork for his most ambitious project yet, a nationwide network of support centers, designed specifically for veterans and their families. The centers would provide a wide range of services, from mental health counseling and job training to housing assistance and legal aid. They would be staffed by veterans themselves, men and women who understood the unique challenges and needs of their fellow service members. And they would be funded by a combination of private donations and government grants, ensuring that they could continue to operate and grow for years to come. It was a massive undertaking, one that would require every ounce of Jake's skill, determination, and leadership. But he knew that it was a cause worth fighting for, a mission that he had been called to fulfill. As the weeks and months passed, Jake threw himself into the project with a passion and intensity that amazed even his closest friends and colleagues. He worked long hours, often late into the night, poring over plans and proposals, meeting with potential partners and donors, and slowly but surely, his vision began to take shape. The first support center opened in the heart of downtown, a gleaming, state-of-the-art facility that quickly became a beacon of hope for veterans and their families. Word spread quickly, and soon, men and women from all walks of life were coming through the doors, seeking the help and support they so desperately needed. Jake was there every step of the way, meeting with clients, offering guidance and support, and ensuring that every person who walked through the doors was treated with the dignity and respect they deserved. And as he watched the transformations taking place before his eyes, the weight of years of trauma and struggle lifting from the shoulders of those he served, Jake knew that he had found his true calling. But even as he celebrated the success of the support centers, Jake knew that there was still so much more to be done. He continued to push for change at the highest levels of government, testifying before Congress and meeting with top military officials to advocate for better treatment and care for veterans. He also began to look beyond the borders of his own country, recognizing that the challenges facing veterans were not limited to the United States alone. He traveled the world, meeting with leaders and organizations in other nations, sharing his experiences and insights, and working to build a global network of support for those who had served. And through it all, he remained a devoted father and friend, always making time for the people who mattered most to him. He watched with pride as Max followed in his footsteps. Joining the military and serving with honor and distinction, he stood by Emily's side as she battled cancer, holding her hand through every treatment and surgery, and celebrating with her when she finally emerged victorious. And he continued to be a mentor and guide to countless others, sharing his wisdom and experience with all who sought his counsel. Years turned into decades, and Jake's legacy continued to grow. The support centers he had founded became a model for others around the world, and his name became synonymous with compassion, integrity, and service. But even as he was honored with awards and accolades, Jake never lost sight of what truly mattered. He knew that his greatest achievement was not in the recognition he received, but in the lives he had touched and the difference he had made. And so, as he sat in his office one day, reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment, Jake felt a sense of peace and fulfillment wash over him. He had faced unimaginable challenges and overcome impossible odds. He had battled his own demons and emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. And he had used his gifts and his talents to make the world a better place, one person at a time. As he looked out the window, watching the sun set over the city he had come to call home, Jake knew that he had finally found his place in the world. He had discovered his purpose, his reason for being, and he had lived it out with every fiber of his being. And in that moment, he knew that he was truly blessed. But even as he savored the sweetness of his success, Jake knew that his work was far from finished. There were still so many veterans who needed his help, so many families who were struggling to find their way. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose and determination, Jake set out to continue his mission. He expanded the support centers, opening new locations in cities across the country and around the world. He partnered with other organizations and leaders, working to create a global network of support and advocacy for veterans and their families. And he never stopped pushing for change, never stopped fighting for the rights and dignity of those who had served. Through it all, Jake remained a humble and dedicated servant, always putting the needs of others before his own. He mentored young veterans, sharing his experiences and insights, and helping them to find their own paths to healing and success. He worked tirelessly to break down the stigmas and barriers that prevented so many veterans from seeking the help they needed, and he fought to ensure that every person who had served was treated with the respect and dignity they deserved. And as the years passed, Jake's impact continued to grow. His name became synonymous with hope and healing, and his legacy inspired countless others to follow in his footsteps. But even as he was celebrated and honored, Jake never forgot the lessons he had learned on the streets, the wisdom he had gained. Through his struggles and his triumphs, he knew that true strength came not from power or wealth, but from the courage to face one's demons and the compassion to lift up those who were struggling. He knew that real leadership was not about giving orders or making decisions, but about listening to the needs and aspirations of others, and working tirelessly to help them achieve their dreams. And he knew that the true measure of a life was not in the accolades or achievements, but in the love and kindness that one shared with the world. And so, as he looked back on his incredible journey, from the depths of despair to the heights of success, Jake knew that he had truly lived a life worth living. He had faced his fears and overcome his obstacles, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than ever before. He had found his calling, his purpose, and he had dedicated himself to it with every ounce of his being. And he had made a difference, not just in his own life, but in the lives of countless others who had been touched by his kindness, his generosity, and his unwavering commitment to service. As the sun began to set on another day, Jake looked out over the city he had come to call home, and he felt a sense of peace and gratitude wash over him. He knew that there would always be challenges to face, always be obstacles to overcome, but he also knew that he had the strength, the courage, and the love to meet them head on, and to continue making the world a better place, one person at a time. And with that knowledge, Jake Hamilton stepped out into the world once more, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, and to continue living a life of purpose, passion, and unending possibility. As the years continued to pass, Jake Hamilton found himself reflecting more and more on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. From the depths of despair and homelessness to the heights of success and influence, his life had been a testament to the power of perseverance, compassion, and unwavering commitment to a greater purpose. But even as he celebrated the many triumphs and achievements of his later years, Jake never lost sight of the challenges and struggles that had defined his earlier life. He knew all too well the pain of losing everything, of hitting rock bottom and wondering if there was any way back up. And he knew that there were still countless others out there who were facing those same challenges, who were fighting those same battles every single day. It was this knowledge that drove Jake to continue pushing forward, to keep fighting for the causes and the people he believed in. Even as he entered his golden years, he refused to slow down or step back from the work that had become his life's mission. He continued to expand the network of veteran support centers he had founded, opening new locations in underserved communities, and partnering with local organizations to provide even more comprehensive services and resources. He worked tirelessly to raise awareness about the unique challenges facing veterans, speaking out in the media and testifying before Congress about the need for greater support and understanding. And he never stopped being a mentor and a guide to the countless veterans who came to him for help and advice, sharing his own experiences and insights in helping them to find their own paths to healing and success. But even as he poured his heart and soul into his work, Jake also knew the importance of taking care of himself and those closest to him. He made sure to carve out time for his family and friends, cherishing the moments of laughter and love that made all the struggles and sacrifices worthwhile. He watched with pride as his son Max continued to serve with honor and distinction in the military, rising through the ranks and becoming a leader in his own right. And he stood by Emily's side through every twist and turn of her journey, celebrating her triumphs and holding her hand through the challenges. As the decades passed, Jake's legacy only continued to grow. The veterans he had helped went on to do incredible things, starting businesses and nonprofits, running for office and becoming leaders in their communities, and the values and principles he had fought for, compassion, integrity, service to others, became woven into the fabric of the nation, inspiring new generations to follow in his footsteps. But even as the world changed and evolved around him, Jake remained committed to the simple, powerful idea that had guided him through his darkest days, that every person, no matter their background or circumstances, deserved a chance to live with dignity and purpose. And so, as he entered the twilight of his life, Jake doubled down on his efforts to make that idea a reality. He launched new initiatives and programs, partnering with leaders across the country and around the world to build a global movement for change. He poured his resources, his time, his energy, his wealth into supporting the causes and organizations he believed in, knowing that every dollar and every hour could make a real difference in someone's life. And he never stopped believing in the power of one person to change the world, to make a difference through the simple act of showing up and being there for others. Even as his health began to decline and his body began to slow Jake's spirit remained as vibrant and indomitable as ever. He continued to show up every day, to give everything he had to the work that had become his calling. And when the time finally came for him to step back and pass the torch to the next generation, he did so with the same grace and humility that had defined his entire life, in a quiet ceremony attended by family, friends, and the countless veterans whose lives he had touched. Jake officially handed over the reins of his organization to a new leader, a young woman whose own journey had been inspired by his example. As he took the stage to deliver his farewell address, Jake looked out over the sea of faces before him, his eyes shining with emotion and gratitude. "My friends," he began, his voice strong and steady despite the weight of the moment, "I stand before you today not as a hero or a legend, but as a man who has been blessed beyond measure by the love and support of so many." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the room, taking in the faces of all those who had been by his side through every step of his incredible journey. "I am here today because of you," he continued, his voice cracking with emotion, "because of the countless men and women who have served this country with honor and courage, who have faced unimaginable challenges and sacrifices, and who have never stopped fighting for what is right and just." As he spoke, the room fell silent, every person hanging on his every word. And in that moment, Jake knew that his legacy would live on, not just through the organization he had built or the accolades he had received, but through the lives and the stories of all those he had touched. "I may be stepping back from the day-to-day work of this organization," he said, his eyes shining with pride and determination, "but I will never stop fighting for the values and the principles that have guided me through every step of my life. I will never stop believing in the power of compassion, of service, of the unbreakable spirit of the human soul." And with those words, Jake Hamilton stepped back from the podium, his head held high and his heart full of gratitude for all that he had been given, and all that he had been able to give in return. In the years that followed, Jake's legacy only continued to grow. The organization he had founded flourished under new leadership, expanding its reach and impact to every corner of the globe. The veterans he had helped went on to do incredible things, becoming leaders and changemakers in their own right, carrying forward the values and the principles that Jake had instilled in them. And even as the world continued to change and evolve, Jake's message of hope and resilience remained as powerful and relevant as ever. His story became a touchstone for generations of Americans, a reminder of the incredible things that were possible when ordinary people found the courage to stand up and make a difference. As for Jake himself, he spent his final years surrounded by the love and laughter of his family and friends. He watched with pride as his son Max continued to serve with distinction, becoming a general and taking on ever greater responsibilities in the military. He held Emily's hand through every challenge and triumph, their love only growing stronger and deeper with each passing year. And he continued to be a mentor and a guide to all those who sought his counsel, sharing his wisdom and his experience with anyone who asked. Even as his health began to fail and his body began to weaken, Jake's spirit remained as strong and unbreakable as ever. He faced every challenge with the same courage and determination that had defined his entire life, never losing sight of the things that truly mattered. And when the time finally came for him to take his final bow, he did so with the same grace and dignity that had always been his hallmark. Surrounded by his loved ones, Jake Hamilton passed away peacefully in his sleep, a smile on his face and a sense of profound gratitude in his heart for all that he had been given, and all that he had been given, and all that he had been able to give in return. The world mourned his loss, but even in their grief, people found solace in the incredible legacy he had left behind. The organizations he had founded, the lives he had touched, the values he had championed, all of it would live on, carrying forward his message of hope and healing to generations yet to come. And so, As the sun set on the final chapter of Jake Hamilton's remarkable life, those who had known and loved him best knew that his spirit would never truly be gone. It would live on in the hearts and minds of all those he had inspired, all those who had been touched by his kindness, his compassion, and his unwavering commitment to making the world a better place. For in the end, that was what Jake Hamilton's life had been all about, not the accolades or the achievements, but the simple, powerful act of showing up for others, of being there when it mattered most. And in that sense, his legacy would endure long after he was gone, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for all those who followed in his footsteps, all those who dared to dream of a better world and who had the courage to make it a reality. As the years turned into decades and the world continued to change and evolve, Jake Hamilton's story only grew in power and resonance. His name became synonymous with the very best of the human spirit, with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to serving others. In schools and universities across the country, students studied his life and his legacy, drawing inspiration from his incredible journey and his tireless advocacy for veterans and their families. In the halls of power, politicians and policymakers invoked his name and his example, using his story to push for greater support and resources for those who had served. And in communities across the nation and around the world, ordinary people found hope and strength in his message, in the idea that anyone, no matter their background or circumstances, could make a difference in the world. For Jake Hamilton had shown them what was possible when one person had the courage to stand up and fight for what was right. He had shown them the incredible power of compassion, of service, of the unbreakable bonds of love and friendship. And he had shown them that even in the darkest of times, there was always a reason to keep going, always a reason to believe in the goodness of the human heart. As the decades passed and new generations came of age, Jake's legacy only continued to grow. The organizations he had founded continued to thrive and expand, touching countless lives and making a real difference in the world. And the values he had championed, integrity, service, compassion, became woven into the very fabric of society, guiding the choices and actions of millions of people across the globe. Looking back on the long arc of Jake Hamilton's life, from the depths of despair to the heights of influence and impact, it was clear that he had accomplished something truly remarkable. He had not only overcome his own struggles and challenges, but he had used his experiences to make the world a better place, to lift up those who were struggling, and to give hope to those who had none. And in doing so, he had left behind a legacy that would endure long after he was gone, a legacy of courage, compassion, and unwavering commitment to the greater good. For in the end, that was what Jake Hamilton's life had been all about, not the fame or the fortune, but the simple, powerful act of making a difference, of leaving the world a little bit better than he had found it. And as the sun set on the final chapter of his remarkable journey, those who had known and loved him best knew that his spirit would live on, inspiring new generations to follow in his footsteps and to carry forward his message of hope and healing to every corner of the world. As the years turned into decades and the world continued to change and evolve, the legacy of Jake Hamilton only grew in power and significance. His story became a touchstone for generations of people around the globe, a shining example of the incredible things that were possible when one person had the courage to stand up and make a difference. In the years following his passing, the organizations Jake had founded continued to thrive and expand, carrying forward his mission of service and compassion to every corner of the world. The network of veteran support centers he had established became a model for other countries and communities, providing vital resources and assistance to those who had served and sacrificed for their nations. The principles and values Jake had championed, integrity, service, compassion, became woven into the very fabric of society, informing the choices and actions of leaders and citizens alike. In boardrooms and classrooms, in halls of power and homes across the land, people looked to Jake's example for guidance and inspiration, drawing strength from his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. As new generations came of age, they grew up learning about Jake Hamilton's incredible journey from the depths of homelessness and despair to the heights of influence and impact. They studied his life in school, reading about his tireless advocacy for veterans and his visionary leadership in creating a more just and compassionate world. And they drew inspiration from his story, from the idea that no matter where they came from or what challenges they faced, they too could make a difference in the world. For many, Jake became more than just a historical figure. He became a symbol of hope and possibility, a reminder that even the most daunting obstacles could be overcome with courage, determination, and a commitment to serving others. Across the country and around the world, people continued to be touched by Jake's legacy in ways both big and small. Veterans who had once struggled to find their place in the world found new purpose and direction through the programs and services he had created. Families who had been torn apart by the trauma of war found healing and support through the communities he had helped to build, and in countless ways, the ripple effects of Jake's life continued to spread outward, touching lives and transforming communities in ways that would have been impossible to imagine during his early years on the streets. As the decades passed and the world continued to change, Jake's story took on new meaning and relevance. In an era of increasing division and polarization, his message of unity and compassion served as a powerful reminder of the things that brought people together, rather than tearing them apart. In a time of great uncertainty and upheaval, his unwavering commitment to service and sacrifice stood as a beacon of hope and inspiration, calling people to be their best selves and to work towards a better, more just world. And, as new challenges and crises emerged, from pandemics to climate change to political upheaval, people continued to draw strength and guidance from Jake's example. From the idea that even in the darkest of times, there was always a way forward, always a reason to keep fighting for what was right. For many, Jake Hamilton became more than just a man. He became a symbol of the very best of the human spirit, a reminder of the incredible things that were possible when people came together in service of a greater good. His name and his image became ubiquitous, gracing everything from monuments and memorials to books and films. His words and his ideas became part of the common language, quoted by leaders and activists, students and scholars alike. And his legacy continued to inspire new generations of changemakers and visionaries, people who looked to his example as they worked to build a better, more just, and more compassionate world. Among those most deeply influenced by Jake's life and work were the veterans he had dedicated himself to serving. For many of them, Jake was more than just a supporter or an advocate. He was a savior, a hero who had pulled them back from the brink and given them a reason to keep going. In the years after Jake's passing, these veterans became some of the most vocal and visible champions of his legacy. They shared their stories with the world, testifying to the incredible impact Jake had had on their lives and the lives of countless others. They worked tirelessly to carry forward his mission, building on the foundation he had laid and expanding the reach and impact of the organizations he had created. They mentored younger veterans, passing on the lessons and values they had learned from Jake, and helping to ensure that his legacy would endure for generations to come. And they continued to be a force for good in their communities and in the world, living out the principles of service and sacrifice that Jake had embodied throughout his life. As the years turned into decades, the world continued to change in ways both big and small. New technologies emerged, transforming the way people lived and worked. New challenges arose, from climate change to public health crises to political upheaval. But through it all, the legacy of Jake Hamilton remained a constant, a reminder of the enduring power of the human spirit. and the incredible things that were possible when people came together in service of a greater good. In schools and universities, Jake's story continued to be taught and studied, inspiring new generations of leaders and changemakers. In communities across the globe, his memory was honored through acts of service and compassion, as people worked to carry forward his mission in their own unique ways, and in the hearts and minds of all those whose lives he had touched. Jake Hamilton lived on a shining example of what it meant to live a life of purpose and meaning, to leave the world a little bit better than you found it. As the decades turned into centuries, and the world continued to evolve in ways that would have been unimaginable during Jake's lifetime, his legacy only grew in power and significance. His name became synonymous with the very idea of service and sacrifice, of the incredible things that were possible when one person had the courage to stand up and make a difference. And though the specifics of his story faded into history, the essence of who he was and what he stood for remained as vital and relevant as ever, a call to action for all those who believed in the power of the human spirit and the ability of ordinary people to do extraordinary things. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest legacy of Jake Hamilton, not the monuments or the memorials, the organizations or the accolades, but the simple, powerful idea that every person, no matter their background or circumstances, had the power to make a difference in the world. It was an idea that had driven Jake throughout his life, from his early days on the streets to his final moments surrounded by loved ones. And it was an idea that continued to inspire and guide countless others long after he was gone. A beacon of hope and possibility in a world that often seemed filled with darkness and despair. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. In the end, Jake Hamilton's life had been a testament to the incredible resilience and strength of the human spirit, to the idea that no matter how difficult the journey, no matter how daunting the obstacles, there was always a way forward, always a reason to keep fighting for what was right. And as long as there were people in the world who believed in that idea, people who looked to Jake's example for guidance and inspiration, then his legacy would endure. A shining light of hope and possibility for generations to come. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries. And still the memory of Jake Hamilton endured, a reminder of the incredible power of one person to change the world, and the enduring impact of a life lived in service to others, in a world that had been transformed in ways that would have been unimaginable during his lifetime, a world of technological wonders and unimaginable challenges. Jake's story continued to resonate, continued to inspire people to be their best selves and to work towards a better, more just future. And though the specifics of his journey faded into the mists of time, the essence of who he was and what he stood for remained as clear and powerful as ever, a call to action for all those who believed in the power of compassion, of service, of the unbreakable bonds of human connection. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest gift that Jake Hamilton had given to the world, not just the organizations he had built or the lives he had touched directly, but the enduring example of what it meant to live a life of purpose and meaning, to leave the world a little bit better than you found it. And as long as there were people in the world who looked to that example for guidance and inspiration, people who believed in the incredible potential of the human spirit, then Jake's legacy would continue to shine bright, a beacon of hope and possibility for all those who followed in his footsteps. For in the end, the story of Jake Hamilton was not just the story of one man's incredible journey from despair to hope, from tragedy to triumph. It was the story of the very best of what it meant to be human, the story of compassion and service, of resilience and strength, of the incredible power of one person to make a difference in the world. And as long as there were people in the world who believed in that story, people who looked to Jake's example as a guide and an inspiration, then his legacy would endure. A shining reminder of the incredible things that were possible when we opened our hearts to the world around us, and to each other. That was the true gift of Jake Hamilton's life, not the accolades or the achievements, the monuments or the memorials, but the simple, powerful idea that every person, no matter their background or circumstances, had the power to make a difference, to leave the world a little bit better than they found it. And as long as there were people in the world who believed in that idea, who looked to Jake's example as a guide and an inspiration, then his legacy would endure, a beacon of hope and possibility for generations to come, and a shining reminder of the incredible potential that lies within us all as the world continued to turn and evolve. As new generations were born and others passed on, the legacy of Jake Hamilton remained a constant presence, a guiding light that illuminated the path forward for all those who believed in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of challenges. In the centuries that followed his passing, Jake's story became the stuff of legend, a tale passed down from parent to child, from teacher to student, from one generation to the next. It was a story that spoke to the very heart of what it meant to be human, to struggle and to triumph, to fall and to rise again, to find hope and meaning in even the bleakest of circumstances. For the veterans who had been touched by Jake's work, his legacy was a source of strength and inspiration, a reminder that they were not alone, that there was always someone who understood their struggles and their triumphs. They carried his memory with them like a talisman, a symbol of the unbreakable bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood that had been forged in the crucible of war. In the halls of government and the corridors of power, Jake's name continued to be invoked as a symbol of the very best of what humanity could achieve. Leaders and policymakers held up his life and work as an example of the kind of moral courage and compassion that was needed to build a better world, a world in which every person, no matter their background or their circumstances, could live with dignity and purpose. And in the hearts and minds of ordinary people around the globe, Jake's story became a touchstone, a reminder that each of us has the power to make a difference, to leave the world a little bit better than we found it. They saw in him a reflection of their own hopes and dreams, their own struggles and triumphs, and they drew strength and inspiration from his example. As the decades turned into centuries, and the centuries into millennia, the world continued to change and evolve in ways that would have been unimaginable during Jake's lifetime. Great cities rose and fell, empires came and went, and new technologies and discoveries transformed every aspect of human life. But through it all, the essential challenges of the human experience remained the same. People still struggled with fear and doubt, with loss and grief, with the search for meaning and purpose in a vast and often incomprehensible universe, and it was in these moments of struggle and uncertainty that the legacy of Jake Hamilton shone most brightly, a beacon of hope and resilience that guided people through the darkness and helped them find their way back to the light. In the great universities and centers of learning that had sprung up across the globe, scholars and researchers devoted entire lifetimes to studying Jake's life and work, to understanding the principles and values that had guided him, and to applying those lessons to the challenges of their own time. They pored over the vast archives of his writings and speeches, his interviews and correspondence, piecing together a portrait of a man who had been driven by an unshakable commitment to justice, compassion, and service. They debated the finer points of his philosophy and his approach to leadership, and they used his example as a lens through which to view the great issues and challenges of their own era. And as they did so, they began to see the world in a new light, not as a place of limitations and constraints, but as a canvas upon which they could paint their own stories of hope and possibility. They saw in Jake's life a template for their own, a roadmap for navigating the twists and turns of their own journeys, and for finding meaning and purpose in even the most difficult of circumstances. Beyond the walls of academia, Jake's legacy continued to inspire and guide people from all walks of life. In the great cities and small towns, in the bustling marketplaces and quiet corners of the world, people continued to be drawn to his story, to the idea that one person, armed with nothing more than a vision and a willingness to work tirelessly in pursuit of that vision, could change the course of history. They saw in him a reflection of their own deepest hopes and aspirations, the desire to live a life that mattered, to make a difference in the world, to leave a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. And they took strength and inspiration from his example, even as they faced their own unique challenges and struggles, in the refugee camps and war-torn regions of the world. In the impoverished neighborhoods and forgotten corners of great cities, people continued to be touched by the organizations and initiatives that Jake had helped to build, the networks of support and assistance that had been created to help those who were struggling to find their way in a difficult and often unforgiving world. These organizations had evolved and adapted over the centuries, taking on new forms and new missions as the needs of the world had changed. But, at their core, they remained true to the principles and values that had guided Jake throughout his life, the belief that every person, no matter their circumstances, deserved to be treated with dignity and respect, and that by working together, in a spirit of compassion and service, we could build a world that was more just, more equitable, and more filled with hope and possibility for all. And so, as the centuries turned and the world continued to change and evolve in ways that would have been unimaginable during Jake's lifetime, his legacy endured, a shining example of the power of one person to make a difference, and of the enduring impact that a life lived in service to others could have on the world. For those who knew his story and were inspired by his example, Jake Hamilton was more than just a historical figure, more than just a name in a textbook or a face on a monument. He was a living presence, a guide and a mentor, a source of strength and inspiration that could be called upon in times of need. They saw in him a reflection of the very best of what it meant to be human, the courage and compassion, the resilience and determination, the unwavering commitment to justice and service that had defined his life and work. And they drew upon that example in their own lives, in the choices they made and the paths they followed, in the way they treated others and the way they sought to make a difference in the world, in the great halls of government and the corridors of power, in the boardrooms of corporations and the classrooms of schools, in the community centers and volunteer organizations that worked to build a better world. The legacy of Jake Hamilton continued to shape and guide the course of human history. It was a legacy that transcended the boundaries of time and place, of culture and creed, a legacy that spoke to the very heart of what it meant to be human, and of the incredible potential that lay within each and every one of us. And as long as there were those who believed in that potential, who saw in Jake's life and work a call to action and a source of inspiration, then his legacy would endure, a shining beacon of hope and possibility that would guide humanity forward, even in the darkest of times. For, in the end, that was perhaps the greatest lesson that Jake Hamilton had left behind, the idea that no matter how difficult the challenges we faced, no matter how daunting the obstacles in our path, there was always a way forward. That by coming together in a spirit of compassion and service, by opening our hearts to the needs of others, and working tirelessly to build a better world, we could overcome even the greatest of odds. It was a lesson that had guided Jake throughout his own life, from his early days as a struggling veteran to his later years as a visionary leader and tireless advocate for change. And it was a lesson that continued to guide and inspire countless others in the centuries that followed. A powerful reminder of the incredible resilience and potential of the human spirit as the world continued to turn and evolve, as new challenges and opportunities arose and old ones faded away. The legacy of Jake Hamilton remained a constant presence, a North Star that guided humanity forward, even in the most uncertain of times. And for all those who followed in his footsteps, for all those who took up the mantle of service and compassion, who worked tirelessly to build a world that was more just, more equitable, and more filled with hope and possibility. His life and work would always be a source of strength and inspiration, a powerful reminder of the incredible potential that lay within us all. So let us remember the story of Jake Hamilton, not just as a tale of one man's remarkable journey, but as a call to action for us all. Let us draw upon his example and his legacy as we face the challenges and opportunities of our own time, and let us work together in a spirit of compassion and service to build a better world for all those who will come after us, for in the end, that is, perhaps, the greatest tribute we can pay to the memory of this remarkable man, to live our lives in a way that honors his values and his vision, and to strive each day to make a difference in the world, just as he did. And if we can do that, if we can keep the flame of his legacy alive in our own hearts, and in the hearts of all those who come after us, then we can be sure that the story of Jake Hamilton will endure, a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. As the centuries turned into millennia, and the world continued to evolve in ways that would have been unimaginable during Jake Hamilton's lifetime, his legacy remained a constant presence, a guiding light that illuminated the path forward for all those who believed in the power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of challenges. In the great cities that rose from the ashes of the old world, towering skyscrapers of glass and steel reaching towards the heavens, people continued to be drawn to the story of the humble veteran who had risen from the depths of despair to become a beacon of hope for all those who struggled and suffered. They learned of his life and his work in the history books and the holographic archives, in the virtual reality simulations and the neural interfaces that had become the primary means of education and communication. They saw in him a reflection of their own hopes and dreams, their own struggles and triumphs, and they drew strength and inspiration from his example in the bustling streets and crowded marketplaces of these cities, where people from all corners of the globe came together to trade and exchange ideas. The name of Jake Hamilton was still spoken with reverence and awe. Street vendors sold tiny holographic figurines of the great man, while performers and artists created immersive experiences that brought his story to life in vivid detail. But it was not just in the cities that Jake's legacy endured. In the vast, sprawling networks of the global village, where people from all walks of life came together in virtual spaces to share their thoughts and experiences, his name was a constant presence, a symbol of the unifying power of compassion and service. In these virtual worlds, people from all corners of the globe could come together to discuss the great challenges of their time, the environmental crises and the political upheavals, the social inequalities and the technological disruptions. And in these discussions, the example of Jake Hamilton was always close at hand, a reminder that by working together in a spirit of empathy and understanding, even the most intractable problems could be overcome. For the veterans of the new era, those who had fought in the great conflicts and upheavals that had shaped the course of human history, Jake's legacy held a special significance. They saw in him a kindred spirit, a fellow warrior, who had fought his own battles and emerged stronger and wiser for the experience. In the virtual reality simulations and the neural interfaces that had become the primary means of therapy and healing for these veterans, Jake's story was a constant presence, a reminder that no matter how deep the scars of war might run, there was always hope for healing and redemption. Through these technologies, veterans could immerse themselves in the world of Jake Hamilton, could walk in his footsteps and experience his struggles and triumphs firsthand. They could feel the weight of his burdens and the strength of his resolve, and they could draw upon that strength in their own battles against the demons of war. And as they did so, they began to see themselves in a new light, not as broken or damaged, but as survivors and warriors, as men and women who had faced the very worst that the world had to offer and emerged unbroken and undefeated. In the great halls of government and the corridors of power, where the decisions that shaped the course of human history were made, the legacy of Jake Hamilton continued to be a guiding light. Leaders and policymakers invoked his name and his example as they grappled with the great challenges of their time, the environmental crises, and the social inequalities, the technological disruptions, and the political upheaval. They saw in him a model of the kind of leadership that was needed in these turbulent times, a leadership based on empathy and compassion, on the willingness to listen to the needs and concerns of all people, regardless of their background or station in life. And they drew upon his example as they worked to build a world that was more just and equitable, more sustainable and resilient, a world in which every person, no matter their circumstances, could live with dignity and purpose. In the great universities and centers of learning, where the brightest minds of the era came together to push the boundaries of human knowledge and understanding, the legacy of Jake Hamilton was a constant presence. Scholars and researchers devoted entire lifetimes to studying his life and work, to understanding the principles and values that had guided him, and to applying those lessons to the challenges of their own time. Through the advanced technologies of the era, the quantum computers and the artificial intelligences, the neural interfaces and the nanotechnologies, they were able to delve deeper into the mysteries of Jake's mind and heart than ever before. They could explore the intricate workings of his brain and the complex web of his emotions, and they could use that knowledge to gain new insights into the human condition. And as they did so, they began to see the world in a new light, not as a place of limitations and constraints, but as a canvas upon which they could paint their own stories of hope and possibility. They saw in Jake's life a template for their own, a roadmap for navigating the twists and turns of their own journeys, and for finding meaning and purpose in even the most difficult of circumstances. Beyond the walls of academia, in the far corners of the world where people still struggled and suffered, the organizations and initiatives that Jake had helped to build continued to be a lifeline for those in need. In the refugee camps and the war-torn regions, in the impoverished neighborhoods and the forgotten corners of the great cities, these organizations were still hard at work, providing food and shelter, medical care and education, hope and opportunity to all those who had been left behind by the march of progress. But now, thanks to the advanced technologies of the era, their reach and impact had grown beyond anything that Jake could have imagined. Through the use of drones and robots, 3D printing and advanced manufacturing, they were able to deliver aid and assistance to even the most remote and inaccessible regions of the world. And through the power of virtual and augmented reality, they were able to bring the stories and experiences of those they served to life in ways that were more vivid and immersive than ever before. People from all corners of the globe could now walk in the shoes of those who had been touched by Jake's legacy, could see the world through their eyes and feel the impact of his work firsthand. As the millennia passed and the world continued to change and evolve in ways that would have been unimaginable during Jake's lifetime, his legacy endured a shining example of the power of one person to make a difference, and of the enduring impact that a life lived in service to others could have on the world. And for all those who continued to be inspired by his example, for all those who took up the mantle of service and compassion, who worked tirelessly to build a world that was more just and equitable, more sustainable and resilient, his life and work remained a constant source of guidance and inspiration. In the virtual reality simulations and the neural interfaces that had become the primary means of entertainment and escape, people could now immerse themselves in the world of Jake Hamilton in ways that were more vivid and realistic than ever before. They could walk the streets of his hometown, explore the halls of the organizations he had founded, and even interact with virtual recreations of the man himself. And as they did so, they began to see themselves in a new light, not as passive observers of history, but as active participants in the ongoing story of human progress. They saw in Jake's life a call to action, a reminder that every person, no matter their circumstances, had the power to make a difference in the world. Through these immersive experiences, people from all walks of life could now connect with Jake's story on a deeper and more personal level than ever before. They could feel the warmth of his smile and the strength of his handshake, could hear the passion and conviction in his voice as he spoke about the causes that mattered most to him. And as they did so, they began to see the world through his eyes, to understand the principles and values that had guided him, and to apply those lessons to their own lives and their own struggles. In the end, that was perhaps the greatest legacy of Jake Hamilton, not the specific accomplishments or accolades, but the enduring example of what it meant to live a life of purpose and meaning, to use one's time and talents in service of something greater than oneself. And as long as there were those who held fast to that example, who believed in the power of compassion and service, and the unbreakable bonds of human connection, then the story of Jake Hamilton would endure a shining beacon of hope and inspiration for all those who followed in his footsteps, and a powerful reminder of the incredible potential that lay within us all. So let us all strive to live up to that example, to be the best versions of ourselves that we can be, to use our own unique gifts and talents to make a difference in the world, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, for in the end, that is perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay to the memory of Jake Hamilton, to carry on his legacy of service and compassion, and to work together to build a world that is more just and equitable, more sustainable and resilient, for all those who will come after us. And if we can do that, if we can keep the flame of his legacy alive in our own hearts, and in the hearts of all those whose lives we touch, then we can be sure that his story will endure, not just as a distant memory or a footnote in history, but as a living, breathing testament to the incredible power of the human spirit to overcome even the darkest of challenges, and to build a better world for all. As Jake Hamilton's influence continued to expand beyond the borders of his own country, he found himself invited to speak at international conferences and summits dedicated to veterans affairs. On a crisp autumn morning, he stood at the podium in Geneva, Switzerland, addressing representatives from dozens of nations about the importance of comprehensive support systems for those who had served. "The wounds of war know no nationality," Jake declared, his voice resonating throughout the Grand Hall. "Whether a soldier fights under the American flag, the Union Jack, or any other banner across the globe, they all share the same sacrifices, the same traumas, and they all deserve the same dignity and support when they return home." The thunderous applause that followed his speech was gratifying, but Jake knew that applause alone wouldn't change lives. As he stepped down from the stage, he was approached by a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. "Mr. Hamilton," the man extended his hand. "I'm Minister Christoph Lehmann of the German Veterans Affairs Department. Your words today struck a chord with me, especially your approach to integrating mental health services with practical support." Jake smiled warmly as he shook the minister's hand. "Thank you, Minister Lehmann. I've found that you can't address one without the other. A veteran might have a roof over their head, but if they're battling demons inside, that shelter isn't enough." "Precisely," Lehmann nodded enthusiastically. "This is why I'd like to invite you to Berlin. We're overhauling our veterans' support systems, and your insights would be invaluable. Perhaps we could arrange for you to tour our facilities and meet with our program directors." The invitation was unexpected but exciting. Jake had never imagined that his work would reach such international proportions. "I'd be honored, Minister Lehmann. Let me check my schedule and get back to you." Later that evening, as Jake sat in his hotel room overlooking Lake Geneva, he video called Emily and Max to share the news. Max's face lit up on the screen, his military uniform crisp despite the late hour wherever he was stationed. "Dad, that's incredible," Max exclaimed. The German system has some innovative approaches to PTSD treatment. I've read about their integration of virtual reality therapy. You could bring back some valuable insights." Emily, sitting beside Max during his leave, smiled proudly. "Jake, you've come so far. From fixing that helicopter in Central Park to advising international governments, it's remarkable." Jake felt a warmth spread through his chest. Despite everything they'd been through, Emily remained his most steadfast supporter, and their relationship had evolved into something perhaps deeper than their earlier marriage, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "I couldn't have done any of it without both of you," Jake replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Max, your courage in following your own path inspired me to keep pushing forward, and Emily, your forgiveness gave me the chance to become the man I always should have been." The conversation shifted to Max's recent promotion and Emily's work with the Family Support Division of Jake's foundation. As they talked, Jake found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought them all to this point. From rock bottom to international recognition, the path had been neither straight nor easy, but every step had led him exactly where he needed to be. The following week, Jake found himself walking through the hallways of a veterans rehabilitation center in Berlin. The facility was state-of-the-art, with light-filled spaces, advanced medical equipment, and a staff-to-patient ratio that would make most American facilities envious. "Our philosophy," explained Dr. Muller, the center's director, "is that rehabilitation must address the whole person, body, mind, and spirit. We've found that incorporating art therapy, outdoor activities, and community service alongside traditional treatments yields the best outcomes." Jake nodded thoughtfully, noting the similarities to approaches he had championed in his own work. "I've observed the same pattern. Isolation is often the greatest enemy for veterans struggling to reintegrate. Creating opportunities for meaningful connection and contribution is vital." As they toured the facility, Jake was particularly impressed by the family integration programs. Spouses, children, and parents were actively involved in the recovery process, attending therapy sessions and participating in educational workshops designed to help them understand and support their loved ones. "This is extraordinary," Jake commented, as they observed a group session where veterans and their families worked together on a collaborative art project. "In the States, we often focus primarily on the veteran and treat the family as secondary. But you've made them equal partners in the healing process." Dr. Muller smiled. "We learned this approach through trial and error. We discovered that when families heal together, the recovery rate increases dramatically. The veteran feels understood rather than isolated, and the family members process their own secondary trauma." Jake pulled out his notebook and began jotting down ideas. "This is something we need to implement more comprehensively in our programs. I've always believed in family involvement, but seeing it executed at this level has given me new insights." The visit to Germany was just the beginning. Over the next 6 months, Jake embarked on what he called his Global Veterans Initiative, visiting rehabilitation centers, support programs, and policymakers in a dozen countries. Each nation had developed unique approaches based on their cultural contexts and resources, and Jake absorbed knowledge from every encounter. In Israel, he studied their proactive approach to trauma treatment, where soldiers received psychological support both during and immediately after combat operations, significantly reducing the incidence of long-term PTSD. In Japan, he observed how traditional practices like meditation and martial arts were integrated with modern therapies to help veterans find balance and purpose. As his international reputation grew, Jake was invited to address the United Nations General Assembly on the global challenge of veteran care. Standing before representatives from nations across the world, Jake delivered what many would later call the defining speech of his career. "War may divide nations," he began, his voice steady and clear, But the aftermath unites us in a common challenge: how to honor the sacrifices of those who served by ensuring they can return to lives of dignity and purpose. This is not merely a matter of gratitude. It is a moral imperative and a practical necessity for the health of our societies. For the next 40 minutes, Jake outlined a comprehensive framework for international cooperation on veterans issues, proposing shared research initiatives, exchange programs for healthcare professionals, and standardized metrics for measuring program effectiveness. He called for the establishment of an international veterans support alliance that would transcend political differences to focus on the human cost of conflict. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Nations that had been historical adversaries found common ground in addressing the needs of their veterans. A working group was formed to develop Jake's proposals into actionable plans, and he was appointed as special advisor to the initiative. Upon returning to the United States, Jake found himself in high demand. News programs wanted interviews, universities requested lectures, and politicians from both sides of the aisle sought his counsel. But amidst the whirlwind of attention, Jake remained grounded in his core mission, making a tangible difference in the lives of individual veterans. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, while Jake was working in his office at the Vanderbilt Industries headquarters, his assistant announced an unexpected visitor, a young woman in her early 20s with striking features that seemed vaguely familiar. "Mr. Hamilton," the young woman said as she entered, her hands clasped nervously before her. "My name is Sarah Williamson. You don't know me, but you knew my father, Sergeant David Williamson. You served together." Jake's heart skipped a beat. As memories flooded back, David Williamson had been his closest friend during his military service, a steadfast presence who had saved Jake's life more than once during their deployments. They had lost touch after Jake's downward spiral into homelessness. "David," Jake whispered, rising from his chair. "How is he? It's been so many years." Sarah's eyes welled with tears. "He passed away 3 months ago, cancer. Before he died, he made me promise to find you. He had been following your work, your speeches, everything you've done for veterans. He was so proud to have served with you, even though you lost contact." Jake came around his desk and guided Sarah to a comfortable chair, his own eyes misting. "Your father was the finest soldier I ever knew, and an even better man. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for him, for your family." "That's actually why I'm here," Sarah replied, reaching into her bag and pulling out a worn leather journal. "He kept this throughout his illness. He wrote letters to you that he never sent, sharing his thoughts on your work, his own struggles after service. He wanted you to have it." With trembling hands, Jake accepted the journal, running his fingers over the cracked leather cover. "Thank you, Sarah. This means more to me than you can know. There's one more thing," she continued, her voice strengthening. "I'm studying psychology with a focus on trauma recovery. I want to work with veterans, just like you do. I was hoping maybe there might be a place for me in your organization, a chance to carry on my father's legacy in some small way." Jake studied the young woman before him, seeing the determination in her eyes that so reminded him of her father. In that moment, he felt a circle closing, a connection restored that he had thought lost forever. "Sarah," he said warmly, "I think that could be arranged. In fact, we're launching a new research initiative on generational trauma in military families. Your perspective would be incredibly valuable." That evening, alone in his apartment, Jake carefully opened David's journal and began to read. The pages contained not just letters to Jake, but David's own journey through post-service life, his struggles with adjustment, his triumph in building a family, his battles with the cancer that eventually took his life. One passage in particular struck Jake deeply. "Hamilton, you magnificent bastard, I saw you on television today, addressing the Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs. Remember when we couldn't even address our platoon without stammering? Now you're changing the world. 1. speech at a time. I want you to know that even during those years when you disappeared, when I heard rumors about you living on the streets, I never lost faith in you. Soldiers know each other's mettle, and I knew you would find your way back. My only regret is that my illness will prevent me from working alongside you in this mission. But know this, every veteran you help, you're helping in my name too. We're still brothers in arms, still fighting the good fight, just on a different battlefield. Tears streamed down Jake's face as he read, both in grief for his lost friend and in gratitude for the unexpected gift of reconnection. David's words reinforced the purpose that had become Jake's North Star, the understanding that his work wasn't just about policies or programs, but about honoring the sacred bond between those who had served together. The next morning, Jake called Theodore Vanderbilt with a new proposal, the establishment of the Sergeant David Williamson Memorial Scholarship, which would provide full funding for the children of deceased veterans to pursue education in fields related to veteran support services. It's not just about honoring one man, Jake explained as he outlined the proposal. It's about creating a pipeline of professionals who have a personal connection to the mission, who understand the challenges from the inside out. Theodore, who had remained Jake's steadfast supporter and friend throughout his rise to prominence, immediately approved the initiative. Jake, your ability to transform personal connections into systemic change continues to amaze me. This scholarship will change lives for generations to come. Within months, the scholarship program was established, with Sarah Williamson serving as its first recipient and eventual administrator. The program quickly gained national attention, with donations pouring in from corporations, foundations, and individuals touched by the mission. For Jake, this new chapter represented the perfect synthesis of his personal journey and his professional mission. By reconnecting with David's family, he had closed a painful chapter from his own past, while simultaneously opening new doors for the future of veteran support. As the Williamson Scholarship Program took root and began to flourish, Jake found himself contemplating the next evolution of his work. The international connections he had established, combined with the fresh perspective brought by Sarah and other young professionals entering the field, pointed toward an expansion of his vision. One evening, as he sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in hues of gold and crimson, Jake realized that his journey had come full circle. From the broken man sleeping in alleyways to the internationally recognized advocate addressing world leaders, he had traversed a path that few could have imagined possible. Yet in that transformation, he had never lost sight of the essential truth that had guided him from the beginning, that every person, no matter how lost or broken they might appear, carried within them the potential for redemption and purpose. It was this belief that had saved him, and it was this belief that he continued to carry into every aspect of his work. As darkness fell over the city, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed Max's number. His son answered on the second ring, the connection crackling slightly from whatever distant part of the world he was currently serving in. "Dad, great to hear from you. I was just reading about the Williamson Scholarship in the Army Times. It's making waves, even over here." Jake smiled, his heart full with pride for his son and gratitude for the journey that had brought them back into each other's lives. "I'm glad to hear it, Max. Listen, I've been thinking about the next phase of our work, and I wanted to get your thoughts. What would you say to establishing international training centers where veterans from different countries could share their experiences and support strategies?" As father and son discussed the possibilities, the stars emerged above the city skyline, silent witnesses to a conversation that would spark yet another chapter in Jake Hamilton's remarkable legacy, a legacy built not on wealth or power, but on the simple, transformative power of second chances. Jake Hamilton's vision for international veteran training centers quickly evolved from concept to reality, fueled by his unwavering dedication and the global network he had cultivated. Within 18 months, the first global veteran exchange center opened its doors in a repurposed military facility outside London, welcoming former service members from 12 different nations. "This is not just a building," Jake declared at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd of dignitaries, veterans, and media representatives. "This is a testament to the universal brotherhood and sisterhood of those who have served. Within these walls, experiences will be shared, innovations will be born, and healing will transcend borders." The center featured collaborative research, laboratories, state-of-the-art treatment facilities, and communal living spaces designed to foster connection and understanding. Veterans from countries that had historically been adversaries now worked side by side, finding common ground in their shared experiences and collaborating on groundbreaking approaches to post-service reintegration. As Jake walked through the facility on its opening day, he was approached by a young British veteran who moved with the help of prosthetic legs. "Mr. Hamilton," the young man said, extending his hand. "James Barrett, Royal Marines. I just wanted to say that your story, it saved my life." Jake clasped the young man's hand warmly. "I'm honored to hear that, James, but I suspect you saved yourself. That's how it works. We can offer support, but the courage to keep going has to come from within." Barrett shook his head, his eyes intense. "After I lost my legs in Afghanistan, I was in a dark place. Then I watched your address to the UN. You said something that stuck with me, that our greatest service might not be what we did in uniform, but what we do after we take it off. That changed everything for me." Jake felt the familiar humility that always washed over him when confronted with the impact of his work. It was moments like these, far from the spotlight of international summits or congressional hearings, that reminded him why he had embarked on this path. The success of the London Center led to rapid expansion of the program. Within 5 years, similar facilities had opened in Seoul, Sydney, Toronto, and Berlin, each adapting the core model to address regional needs and cultural contexts, while maintaining the central mission of cross-cultural collaboration and comprehensive support. As his 70th birthday approached, Jake began to contemplate the future of the organizations and initiatives he had built. Though still vigorous and sharp-minded, he recognized the importance of ensuring that his work would continue beyond his own lifetime. At a special board meeting of the Hamilton Veterans Foundation, he surprised his colleagues by announcing his intention to step back from day-to-day operations and assume the role of chairman. "The time has come," he explained, looking around at the faces of those who had become his extended family, "to ensure that these organizations remain vibrant and relevant for generations to come. That means new leadership, fresh perspectives, and a clear succession plan." His announcement was met with resistance from some board members who couldn't imagine the foundation without Jake at the helm, but he remained firm in his decision. "The worst thing I could do," he insisted, "would be to make myself indispensable. True leadership means preparing others to carry the torch forward." In a move that surprised many, but made perfect sense to those who knew him best, Jake nominated Sarah Williamson as his successor. In the decade since she had first walked into his office with her father's journal, Sarah had distinguished herself as a brilliant strategist and compassionate advocate, earning the respect of everyone in the organization. "Sarah brings not only expertise and dedication," Jake explained to the board, "but also a personal connection to our mission that cannot be manufactured or taught. She understands in her bones what we're fighting for." The transition was executed thoughtfully over the course of a year, with Jake gradually stepping back as Sarah stepped forward. By the time the formal handover was completed at the Foundation's annual gala, the organization was thriving under her leadership, with Jake serving as her trusted advisor. The gala, held at the Vanderbilt Industries headquarters, brought together hundreds of supporters, partners, and beneficiaries of Jake's work. As he took the stage to deliver what many assumed would be a farewell address, he surveyed the crowd with a heart full of gratitude. "Looking out at all of you tonight," he began, his voice still strong despite his years, "I am reminded of something I learned during my darkest days on the streets of this city. The most powerful force in human experience is not hatred, or fear, or even love. It is connection, the invisible threads that bind us to one another and give meaning to our struggles." Jake paused, his eyes finding Max in the crowd, now a distinguished military leader in his own right, and Emily beside him, her face still beautiful to Jake after all these years. "When I fixed Theodore Vanderbilt's helicopter that day in Central Park, I wasn't just repairing a machine. I was taking the first step toward repairing myself, toward reconnecting with the world I had cut myself off from. Every organization we've built, every program we've launched, every life we've touched has been about fostering that same kind of reconnection for others who feel isolated by their experiences." The room was silent, hundreds of people hanging on his every word. "As I step back from the day-to-day leadership of our foundation, I do so with the absolute confidence that the work will continue, that the connections will grow stronger, and that the future is in capable hands. This is not an ending, but a new beginning for me, for Sarah, and for all of us who believe in the power of second chances." The standing ovation lasted for several minutes, but Jake eventually raised his hands to quiet the crowd. "Before I conclude, I want to share one final announcement. In partnership with global media platforms, we are launching Second Chances, a channel dedicated to sharing the stories of veterans and others who have overcome tremendous obstacles to rebuild their lives and serve their communities." Screens around the ballroom lit up with the channel's logo and a powerful montage of veteran stories from around the world. "This initiative," Jake continued, "will serve as both inspiration and practical resource, offering not just powerful testimonials, but also concrete guidance for those navigating their own journeys of recovery and reintegration. I invite all of you to subscribe, to share, and to contribute your own stories, because every story of transformation has the power to ignite another." In the months that followed, Jake devoted himself to the launch of the Second Chances channel, working closely with a team of veteran journalists and filmmakers to create content that was both emotionally impactful and practically useful. The channel quickly gained millions of subscribers worldwide, becoming a vibrant community for those seeking hope and guidance in their own recovery journeys. Though no longer at the helm of his foundation, Jake remained an active presence in the veteran community, mentoring young leaders, speaking at key events, and continuing to advocate for policy changes at both national and international levels. He also devoted more time to his family, treasuring his role as grandfather to Max's children, and maintaining the deep friendship with Emily that had evolved over the decades. On cool mornings, Jake could often be found walking through Central Park, sometimes pausing at the clearing where his life had changed forever. Occasionally, a passerby would recognize him and approach with words of gratitude or admiration. But more often, he moved through the park anonymously, just another New Yorker enjoying the peace of a morning stroll. During one such walk on the 20th anniversary of his chance encounter with Theodore Vanderbilt, Jake found himself drawn to the exact spot where the helicopter had landed. As he stood there, memories washing over him, he noticed a young homeless veteran sitting on a nearby bench, his worn backpack and haunted eyes all too familiar. Without hesitation, Jake sat down beside the young man and extended his hand. "I'm Jake," he said simply, "and I'd like to hear your story, if you're willing to share it." As the young veteran began to speak, Jake listened intently, knowing that in this moment, on this bench, another journey of reconnection was beginning, another second chance, taking root in the fertile soil of human compassion. And somewhere in the world, thousands of subscribers to the Second Chances channel were finding their own paths forward, guided by the light of Jake Hamilton's enduring legacy, a legacy built on the simple, powerful truth that it's never too late to begin again.